Powered by Rev Media in partnership with TSN, episode 4, season 5 of the Ray Dregs Anything podcast. And it is presented by our title sponsor, Canadian Club Whiskey. Ray, my good friend, you know what goes well with any Canadian Club whiskey is a nice piece of meat.
Really?
Yeah.
So is it? Are you back to smoking season here, Dregs?
I am. So I get up early this morning. Katie is coming back from law school late this afternoon. I think Mason Dreger will make his way. He's working today at Sleeman Brewery, though, by the way. So we'll get him back into the mix here. But I've got the ribs on, and it's going to be a smoke slow cook combo, if that makes any sense to you, because I don't like to over smoke, Ray. So it's smoking right now. I'll let it smoke for about an hour, maybe 90 minutes, and then just leave it at like 220 and just slow cook those bad boys all day. So,
you know, your enthusiasm for this quite escapes me. And I know people that do it and love it. Mm-hmm. My son Landon loves it. He's right into that stuff. And you know, actually Matt is too, my oldest. I just want to eat it. So if you want to go, if
somebody has to make it and prepare it, Ray, for you to eat it.
This is the problem I have, is that you and Ryan, you know, Rashog are sitting there talking about, is it this kind? Is it that kind? Are you using wood chips or whatever you're doing? And you make it sound like you're doing all this work. You just told me. No. You get it to 220, you fire the stuff in, and you go away for hours.
Yeah.
Like,
that's
you're
exactly
not doing
what
anything.
Happens.
You're not doing anything.
I posted a video on Instagram, and automatically it's going to come across as I'm shilling for a new smoker, or it's just shameless plugging and all of that, because it's a little pit boss. And even you, my friend, could manage this thing, because you know what you do? You plug it in. It's electric.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
You put the wood pellets, whatever flavor you want. They go into a hopper, and then automatically they're augured into the barbecue. So you set your temperature, and you just leave it. You just walk away.
Okay. Now, I think I can handle this.
You can do this.
Yeah, that sounds like something I could do. And then I could tell everyone, oh, geez, I'm smoking this stuff back home. Yeah, like I've really done
competition
something.
Quality.
No chance.
Well, and look, we're recording episode 4 here at 6:30 a.m. Pacific time, 9:30 Eastern. So
when you said you were up early, what were you up at the crack of 8?
No, 6:45 Eastern every day. That's when my body clock hoists me out of bed. Yeah.
I like that. I like the early start.
So look, there will be a point this weekend, being a holiday weekend, where I will sip on a lovely glass
Canadian,
of CC, but
for sure.
Like 9:30 in the morning when you're getting the smoke, it's a touch. That's a touch.
But this is now that's actually with Canadian Club. This is the season you start.
Yes,
for me, that it's more comfortable. Like I'm like, oh yeah, now it's the time.
Yeah, I got it. All right, let's get to Tim Hortons headlines, Ray. And a lot going on, as there always is, as you cruise into the latter stages of the preseason, because decisions are being made, and younger players are forcing tough decisions to be made. So thank you to Tim Hortons. And a reminder, Canada, Tim's NHL trading cards are back with an all-new set. So get ready to unpack the thrills, score your favorite hockey stars' hot commodity here. Grab them before they're gone. They're available now only at Tim's. We're going to talk about some of these young players that are pushing the envelope here, making a case around the NHL. But first, news out of the boardroom. The Board of Governors met this week, right? And you know Commissioner Bettman. He never says anything unless he has certainty that this is what is going to happen. And if you try and push him into a corner to answer a question and he doesn't want to answer it, he can get annoyed, right? He'll just say, why do you keep asking me this? We're not there yet. Whatever it is, there's a deflection. So he basically announces that the salary cap is expected to go up by probably close to $4.5 million next year. Not shocking, not even surprising, Ray, because we've been expecting this, right? The players' debt will get paid off at some point this season. So I guess what I'm asking here is, if you look at the top of the crop of pending unrestricted free agents. And a lot can get done in negotiations over the course of the year. But I'm looking at Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuck with the Winnipeg Jets. Of course, it's Toronto, so we're going to hear a lot about William Nylander and whether he's negotiating to stay or not. If you're one of those men, and now you've learned that the cap, and the agents would have known this, they would have expected this, does that further galvanize your position to just say, I'm not signing in season. I'm going to roll the dice. And I'm either going to get my money from the team that I'm with because there's more money in the hopper, or there'll be a place for me. There'll be a competitive place for me based on the cap going up that much.
I think it puts more pressure on the teams. And the reason I say so is the players, of course, are expecting and have been hoping for this increase in the cap over the last couple of years. And so now here we are, you're on the cusp of it. And their leverage is that they will and can say to their manager, look, we know the cap's going up. There's more money in the system. If you can't sign me to the deal that I think's fair or that I want now, I'm going to walk to July 1st. And so the leverage point really is with the players, because everybody knows there's another $125 or so million minimum in the system next year for player salaries, and it is significant. The player already knows for the most part if he wants to stay or not. I mean, I guess something can change between now and in the end of their contract, one way or the other. But I think probably Hellebuck and Scheifele and some of the other names that are out there, and they're the two most prominent because they're unrestricted at the end of the year. They've probably got a pretty good idea, as does Kevin Cheveldayoff, as to what the road forward might look like. And does the extra money help them? Them being Winnipeg, maybe, but though they probably already have a pretty decent idea about, what the next 6 or 8 months are going to look like.
All right, we're not going to get bogged down in negotiations here in headlines, but we are attacking news of the week. And Jamie Drysdale signs a 3-year deal with the Anaheim Ducks yesterday. $2.3 million per. Pat Verbeek, the GM, absolutely squeezed Drysdale and Trevor Zegras right to the brink. And in Drysdale's case, because he doesn't have games played, he was in a real tough situation. We talked about this because Anaheim owned his rights for 2 years, no ARB rights for Drysdale. This is an incredible deal for the Ducks, mostly because they get that 3rd year, right? I'm sure both sides were pushing for a 2-year bridge. Anaheim gets that 3rd year. So is this a combination of good business management by Verbeek and opportunity for the player, or because the squeeze was so significant, as a club, do you risk pissing these players off? Those kids didn't really have a choice, right? They got to get back into the league and they got to get playing. It's just their second contract. Or does that even matter? It only matters to me, Ray, because of the mountain of cap space that the Ducks have. This wasn't the Ducks trying to squeeze these two players under their salary cap.
Right.
This was Pat Verbeek grabbing that second contract by the throat and saying, I'm using all of the tools that I have to cut the best deal moving forward.
Well, there's lots there. So first off, the cap and the mountains of cap space, maybe he doesn't have that mountains of cap space from the ownership. Maybe they said, while we're rebuilding, we have our own internal cap, and our internal cap is X, whatever that might be. As for the player, he can be pissed off as much as he wants, but it's up to him and his support team to understand that there is going to be a time when he has leverage.
Yeah.
And Jamie Drysdale is a terrific young, exciting player who lost a year to a shoulder injury. And so this year, he's got to reestablish his game to, he has not shown, and it's of no fault of his, he would have shown it last year, but he hasn't shown that he's an everyday NHLer, that he's he's going to reach the potential that most of us think that he'll get to. So he can do that this year. Then you got 2 years to go. And then guess what? Guess who's got the leverage?
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, if you're Anaheim, just because you have cap space doesn't mean you have to give it away. Doesn't mean if you give Jamie Dry, here's the risk the manager runs into. If you give away more than you really want to, because you don't want to grind so hard with this early contract, the dollars might seem insignificant now.
Right.
But in 3 years, when Drysdale maybe throws a couple of 50-point seasons on the board, then those dollars aren't significant. You're starting from a new place. And so sometimes you have the hammer and sometimes you don't. And the team had it now.
Hand-wringing for DJ Smith, the head coach of the Ottawa Senators. And as we're recording this episode of Ray and Dregs, we're recording here on Friday morning. So again, things can change with a phone call. So there's just the disclaimer. I don't know. Shane Pinto's an established NHL player, right? He is.
He's a good player.
And you've got some uncertainty with Josh Norris, who strangely is having trouble with that surgically repaired shoulder. I mean, he's got stiffness, he's got soreness, who knows? I mean, you've probably lived that. It was curious how DJ kind of worded the explanation of where Josh Norris is and kind of laid it out there, saying maybe there's a mental hurdle that he's going to have to get through. For me, that's a bit of dangerous territory, right? If I were a coach, I wouldn't talk about player injuries at all. Never. I was told he wasn't available. I'm not sure what it is. We'll update you when we have more information. He's just not available to us right now. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, are you not, like, you're literally in this case trying to get into the head of a player? Well, medically he's fine, but mentally he's not so good. That's my read on it.
Let me jump into that. We just finished talking about Pat Verbeek and Jamie Drysdale and about the relationship between management and player and whether the player would be upset, given the contract he signed. I would be more upset if my coach questioned whether I wanted to play or not. I really would. I would get over the money thing in a hurry because I still making $2.3 million and I'm 20 years old and I'm going to get back and play. And I know next time I'm going to have the leverage. Mm-hmm. However, I would be sour. I really would. I would be like, look, I'm doing everything I can. Like I just don't feel right. If that's indeed the case, if you don't feel right, the doctors can tell you everything that they can tell you medically. But if it doesn't feel right, if your shoulders sometimes it is a feel. And maybe sometimes you do have to fight through a little bit. But if this has gone on long enough, he's clearly not comfortable. And that's a tough spot to be. And some guys, look, we're not there. We're not Josh Norris. Some guys can handle more than others. Some guys are comfortable with more than others. And that's not a positive nor a negative. That's just the way it is. Everybody's different. Look, Josh he's a really good player and a really important player for them. And Shane Pinto at his stage of his career is a really valuable player for what Ottawa has. And if you take the middle of your ice, the centers, and gut out 2/3 of your top three, you're going to be in tough. Here's the other thing is those guys are going to have to come from a dead stop to the season. And generally speaking, if you start camp slow, or start camp absent and miss the preseason, it takes you a while to catch it. I've long called it, you're trying to get on a moving bus, and it's tough to find the door sometimes. It takes you a while.
Okay, we're going to talk about the young players that I teased in just a moment, but we've had Brendan Gallagher of the Montreal Canadiens on the podcast before, and you've got history with Gally. He's a real good dude. Arpan Basu of The Athletic wrote an interesting piece talking about maybe the reality here that the structure of the Montreal Canadiens could see Gallagher on the fourth line, probably with Jake Evans, and who knows how they fit that. I'm at my thinking with Gallagher is he might be one of the few players in the NHL, right? Okay, and this is where the Montreal Canadiens, where they are. No one expects them to compete for a playoff spot, but you do have to develop a culture. And Gallagher, high character individual, he'd be all in for that. But there'll be some in that market, fans who go, how can you pay a fourth line player $6.5 million on that? Well, he wasn't a fourth line player and probably isn't today based on that dollar value. Number one, what would your reaction be to Galley playing on the fourth line in Montreal? And then number two, if that's the case, he would be a hybrid, wouldn't he? Wouldn't he be a Corey Perry where you give him power play time and you find ways to kind of wet his beak throughout the year?
Well, he would be for sure, but it's interesting as players get older, and the circumstance of the team changes. And I think in this case is probably a marriage of those two, is that, the Canadians are not in a place like Ottawa and Buffalo yet, where, they think and Detroit, that they think they're right there. They can push this year for a playoff spot. Montreal's developing young players. They need ice time for those players. It does young players no good to play 8 minutes a game. And Gallagher's probably a player that would chew up some ice time that could go to some of the younger players, which really again, as you get older, it's really, you got to take a bite of a crap sandwich once in a while. And that's like, and it is, you're better in your career than the position you're playing, but in your spot, you slide down the chart because it's not so much about today, even though for you, the only thing that matters is today, is your career now. The organization has a look to the immediate future, and probably you're not as big a part of it as you were just a few short years ago.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to look at. Like when I was in LA, all of a sudden I'm looking around and I'm like, ooh, you know what? Like Joseph Stumple is a really good player and he's going to be our top centerman. And ooh, I'm not going to be in that. When the power play starts, I shuffle to the left. I don't jump over the boards. Like it's an ego hit, but I do know Galley, and I do know that where his position to start is probably not going to be where he's going to finish, because he just will will himself into a different place. And so it is interesting. The Canadians got a lot of young players that they want to give them road to run on right now. And so that's an interesting spot.
So a number of teenagers are on the cusp of making NHL rosters, or at the very least, extending their stay. Then the decisions for the clubs get tougher. If you go beyond 9 games, you burn off year one of the entry-level contract. That's not position A for a lot of teams for obvious reasons, but some are okay with it. I mean, if the player has earned that right, then why wouldn't you? Why worry about that first year? Because if he's going to be a player, then he's going to help you in the here and now. But
okay, so that goes back to Drysdale again.
Yeah,
is like it does matter, because what if one of these young kids burns off that first year and then gets into a position where you really got to pay him?
Yeah,
come the end of their entry
sooner
level
than
contract.
You were hoping. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, so it does matter in that regard, but
yeah. There are a number. And so when I put the call out on social media to, fire us questions, ask Ray and Dregs anything, it was curious. We probably had 3 or 4 come in specifically on these young guys. There's so much talk around Fraser Minten and the Toronto Maple Leafs. So much talk, and deservedly so. I mean, he was really good again last night against the Detroit Red Wings. So he's got one more tune-up game on Saturday. We'll see. I think he's playing. I'm not sure of that. Kamloops the Kamloops players just can't envision going the year without Fraser Minten. They love the fact he's having a good start to his NHL career, but they love the idea better that he comes back to Kamloops and then is a key figure on the World Junior Championship team. So your thoughts on Minten? I got a couple of questions on Boston's Matty Poitras, who I know well personally. I mean, he's having a sensational camp with the Bruins. Scored again last night, actually the game-winning goal for the Bruins over the New York Rangers. You've got Zach Benson in Buffalo. Nate Danielson looked good last night for the Detroit Red Wings. So where are you on these? These kids aren't Bedard. We know Connor Bedard is going to play and will likely be a star for the Chicago Blackhawks. So no sense talking about that. But where are you with these 19-year-olds and kind of being right on that cusp, on that edge of sticking in the NHL?
Well, I think the teams are probably all really enthusiastic and pumped that these young kids have had such a great camp. Yet, when they think for 10 seconds, they go, man, this was not supposed to be. Like they nobody comes into camp and thinks, maybe this 18 or 19-year-old can make our team. They just don't think that way. Yet every once in a while, somebody just jumps up and surprises you. It is interesting. Every year there's a couple of players like this, and come the end of camp or the first part of the season, they just can't maintain the pace they played at that made them so interesting in camp, and they end up getting sent back to junior. Now, last year, there's a great example of one that nobody really even gave him a chance in Dallas, and that's Wyatt Johnston. And
great example.
And by the end of the camp, when they were they were talking about players, Pete DeBoer said he was going to go hide Johnston so that Jim Nill couldn't find him in case he was thinking of sending him back. Well, he had an amazing year. And we had a Dallas game. Dregs, it had to be in December, and we were talking to Johnston after the morning skate, and he came out and he looked like Jamie Benn's younger brother, or like he looked like by 20 years he looked like a little kid. He had an amazing year. Some guys can do it, and so I think like Minten's in a place that there's a pressure in Toronto that's different in a lot of places, and he seems to me the type that has made this great bolt into consciousness of the Leafs management and certainly the fan base. Yeah. And it might not be the best place for him on the long term, but they get this 9-game look. They still have plenty of time. Mm-hmm. Poitras he's Wyatt Johnston. He's going nowhere. I watched him last night, and his ability to get around the ice, he always kind of, I don't know if he's the fastest guy. Johnston's not. I don't know if they're kind of built pretty similarly, I think. They're really thin still. Yeah. And if you look at his goal, he gets into the front of the net and he realizes that he's in too deep, that there's no pass. So he backs up 2 feet. The pass comes, he shoots it in the net. And I'm like, that is, I'm going to say that is unteachable. What happened in that moment. He just, because it's not like you go, oh, gee, I'm too deep here. Maybe I should move back 2 steps. It's too late. Like, he just got in there, looked, and went, oh, wrong spot. Backed up, it's in the net. Like, so Danielson, so Poitras, I think he's starting the year there. They also have the need for it. With Bergeron and Krejci retiring, that's an enormous hole at the top of their center lineup. And this kid has given them more than pause to go, you know what? He deserves to start the year here. Danielson's in a different spot in Detroit because Detroit is so young, and Yzerman has been loath to start young guys ahead of their time there. Yeah. So I think it all depends on the team and the circumstance, but man, isn't it cool when young guys start to get noticed and you're like, wow, this guy, team, it's easy to get running downhill and you're like, oh my God, I think that guy can play. What if he can play? And oh my God, with the cap the way it is, it gives us a player at 862. And, it's pretty interesting. But of that group, and Benson would be another one. Benson's had a great camp.
He has. Yeah, really good.
But I would say, the one that stands out is Poitras in Boston. I think he's there.
So quick story, and full disclosure here. I mean, I know his family very, very well. Phil, his dad, is a good friend of mine. Phil and Trish, his mom. So they're obviously watching the Bruins game last night. We've got it on in studio, but we're doing the Leafs and the Red Wings game. So I'm keeping an eye on it. I see in the intermission that our good pal, Darren Pang, is interviewing Matty Poitras, right? And so I text the dad, Phil, and he responds and he goes, I can't say exactly what he said, but he's like, Jesus. He goes, Trisha turned the channel as soon as the period ended. She wanted to see what was going on in the Leafs game. So awesome. And he goes, I'm sour. So
they missed the interview.
They missed the interview. Right. So instantly, being the S disturber that I am, I'm like, oh, that's too good. So I text Panger, who's working the game, right? He's between benches. I'm like, Panger, I said, you're not going to believe this. You know, he doesn't know that I know Phil and Trish and Maddie. I know him very, very well. And so I tell him that story, but I'm not thinking he's going to broadcast the story. So he tells the story on air. And like 5 minutes later, I get a text from Phil and he's killing himself laughing. He goes, I love that you just threw Trisha under the bus.
But you got to know Panger better than that. If you lob an apple up in the air like that, man, it is done, finished.
Well, I'll be careful the next time, especially when I know he's actually, seconds away from a live microphone. So all good. Anyway, those are your Tim Hortons headlines.
Tim's NHL trading cards are back. Unpack the thrill. Score your favorite icons with an all-new set. Get yours before they're gone. Only at Tim's.
Interviews on Ray Dregs brought to us by Canadian Club Whiskey. Introducing the first release of the Canadian Club Invitation Series. Yum, yum. CC 15-year-old Sherry Cask. It's their signature CC Classic 12-year-old, finished with a secondary aging in Oloroso Sherry Cask. And all the hallmarks rave classic Canadian Club with the added richness and sweetness of sherry. And we're gonna do things a little different. And I don't think CC's gonna mind this next week. Normally, we like to schedule our interviews on Tuesdays. I don't know why. We just do, right? We have 2 podcasts.
I don't know. That's what you do. I just show up. And,
well,
you don't want me gumming up the process. So.
I've been going back and forth with the great people at the Montreal Canadiens, and Cole Caulfield is going to join us next week. But because of their practice and travel and all that, the only time he can do it is Friday. So that would be episode 6. So our next CC installment of the Ray Dregs interviews will be Cole Caulfield and the Montreal Canadiens. Can you make Friday work? Friday should work for you.
Friday will be, I will be in Washington for the Capitals home opener against the Pittsburgh Penguins. So I will knock off the podcast early and game at night. And that the Caps play like one game in the first week for whatever reason. They're sitting around, which sucks. The players just want to, coaches, Spencer Carberry making his NHL head coaching debut. They just want to get going.
They do. A lot of teams feeling that too, but you're right. Just given the few games that they're playing. Ask Ray Dregs Anything. We invite you each week to send your questions. You can do it on our socials, Twitter, Instagram, at Ray Dregs, or on the website, rayanddregs.com. We got a few from the website, Ray, so we're going to show the website a little bit of love here. Keith Kavanaugh is asking, if the Lightning don't make a move, and we've kind of touched on this in the past, but if the Tampa Bay Lightning don't make a move and decide to go with their current goaltending scenario, do you think they will fall too far behind the pack in the Atlantic Division without Andrei Vasilevsky in the first couple of months of the regular season and miss the playoffs? I don't think they're missing the playoffs, but I guess it's possible.
Well, I don't think they get through the weekend with the same goalies. I do think there are options available for them that'll pop up on waivers that'll give them at least
Martin Jones,
Martin Jones, maybe Alex Lyon if he pops through, and like Detroit might keep 3 goalies. Here's something that might happen.
It's a lot of them, yeah.
But here's something, Dregs, that may happen is that teams may not want to expose a goalie and keep 3 to start. Buffalo would be one of those teams. they've got, with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Eric Comrie, they might not want to expose one of them.
Montreal is another, right? I mean, there's a few of those. Yeah.
Yeah. Montreal all of a sudden is like, would they put Montembeault on waivers?
Well, they're not putting Caden Primo on waivers because they'd lose him. They know they'll lose.
And so if you're Tampa, now all of a sudden you say, okay, we've got the two guys that we have, and Johansson and Matt Tompkins, who played last year or the last few years in Europe, was on the Canadian Olympic team.
Yeah.
Are we okay with those guys, or do we look at the possibility of Montembeault and Jones and Lyon, perhaps Comrie, if they're on waivers? Are those guys better? And that'll be the decision, and it won't be. They have no concern over the cap because they'll put away Vasilevsky's salary, and when he comes back, the salary they'll have to deal with will be small enough they'll be able to.
Okay. I'm with you. I think that they're going to have to address that. They're just waiting to see what the market shows them, and we'll learn that. We'll learn that in the very near future. I get this question probably once a season here, and it comes from Sean Main this year in season 5. Curious about how Dregs gets his insider information. And as soon as I read that, I thought, this guy's taking a shot at me. He's going to be one of those clowns that says, he makes it up half the time. It doesn't. But here we go. Obviously, you can't give up your sources, but do people in NHL organizations contact you? Or do you hear whispers and then you reach out, contact them? I presume they aren't supposed to give you information, but they do. Just curious about your process. And he's kind of worked it through, to be fair. And I wouldn't say you jab me about this. I think you have an appreciation for how I go about my business because we've worked together for so long. But he's kind of nailed it without outing sources. I'm not going to do that. But as I've talked about, you and I have known each other a long, long time. There are NHL coaches and NHL managers and presidents and owners that I've known for the better part of 20, 30 years, right? So it's gotten trickier, I would say. If we're caught up in breaking news as insiders, it's way more difficult because of social media. Stuff happens immediately. 10 seconds later, you're no longer the author of the breaking news. But it comes to relationships. That's the way it is. You treat people the right way, and hopefully when you need them to pick up the phone to say, okay, you just made a big trade. Why'd you do that? For me, that's the information that matters. And that's what I work hard to.
Well, I would say as well, if a coach wants to get his ideas out there when we're meeting with them, they'll tell us their ideas. And you've got to be careful that you don't just amplify his message that he wants to get out, whether it be right or wrong. And so there is a little bit of... I don't know. I guess you get better at it, or you think you get better at putting the sieve out about what can go through and what can't. Because sometimes they're just trying to send their message through, and that you got to be careful with that.
So, I mean, Jody Vance, of course. She's she's now part of a pretty successful talk show in Vancouver. I used to work with Jody back in the early days at Sportsnet. And this is pre-Twitter, but a funny story nonetheless. Mike Keenan had worked at Sportsnet temporarily. I got to know Mike during that time. We became fast friends, right? So he goes now back into the world, I guess, coaching in Vancouver. Maybe it was Florida. Would have been Florida with Pavel Bure. And Bure had injured his hand or something. So I'm having a conversation one morning with Keenan. And he says, bad news with Pav. He's going to be a while, whatever the injury was, right? And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, do you mind if I report that? And at the time, again, no Twitter. So you post it or you go on TV and you talk about it. So I post something. Anyway, I'm going to paraphrase. Jody was anchoring one of the news shows on Sportsnet. And she essentially says, one of the perks of having a coach work for your network is when stuff happens like injuries, they call our insiders or our hockey people, which is exactly what happened with Mike Keith calling that. And I'm like, oh my God, did she just say this?
Oops.
Anyway, we might get a good chuckle. We had a good laugh about it, but that's kind of the stuff that goes on. It doesn't happen anymore. All right, Victor Troy, to wrap up Ask Ray and Dregs Anything, Ray. You've said in the past that you didn't keep or collect much memorabilia, right? Mm-mm. From either your playing days or those around you. But Victor is asking, do you have one item that you kept or cherish? Or is there a piece you wish you would have kept or maybe asked for from someone you played with or against?
Well, right next to where we're taping this is my room with the furnace and stuff. And in there is sticks that have been taped together since I retired in 2002.
Yeah.
I've never put them up. I don't know why. I haven't been a memorabilia guy. I don't have one piece of memorabilia from any sport that I would go, oh, you got to see this. I just don't. And do I wish I had some? Yeah, I look at some guys, caves or whatever, and I'm like, oof, they got some great stuff in there. I don't even have all of my jerseys up on the wall. I just never, I don't know. I just never got into the collecting part of it. I just didn't. I got a few autographs on the way of, like, Jim Rice was my favorite baseball player. I got a chance to get his autograph at one time, and don't know where it is.
I can't see you chasing, like, and some players do. Maybe like Aaron Ward used to tell the stories of all the guys that he'd kind of chase down and ask for a stick. Or I can't envision Ray Ferraro chasing Wayne Gretzky down after he scored his 12th consecutive 50-goal year.
Yeah. No, but honestly, the sticks that I do have, I don't even know who they are anymore. I know Mario's one because it's way taller than everyone else. Nice. They're in that plastic wrap that
like bubble wrap?
It's not bubble wrap. It's like a packing wrap. They're all together. I think there's, I don't know, maybe 15 of them, but they're right next to the furnace. So yeah, I keep saying, oh, I got to get those up. And then I don't know, what am I going to put them up now for? So,
well, just do me a favor. Don't cut them up and build them into a coffee table or something ridiculous.
No, I won't. First of all,
honor the memory.
Dregs, you've known me long enough. Could I cut anything up and
your
make it into
maybe,
anything? Yeah, there's no chance. Useless.
All right, we're going to land the plane here on episode 4 of the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast. Before we do that, and I didn't participate, and I mean, you have gone through so many of the TSN Top 50 countdowns over the years, so you know what that process is like, and it's a task. You just don't sit down and put 50 names on a piece of paper. You're projecting the top 50 players. So that's being unveiled on tsn.ca. We won't go through all 50.
Impossible task. Really.
Like, incredibly hard if you're doing it the right way.
So how about when you make your list and then there's somebody you have totally forgotten, and it comes to your attention somehow, and you're like, well, where do I put him?
And who am I taking out?
Yeah, like I don't know. I always found that to be like way harder than it should have been.
Well, I'm going to just fully admit that I would cheat all the time. I mean, Dave Poulin, as an example, you can appreciate Dave Poulin would invest a ton of time into it, right? Yeah. So I just say, hey, Poulin, just send me your list. I want to cross-reference it. There was no cross-referencing. I didn't even have my list done yet.
Oh,
I would make a couple of subtle changes here or there, so it wasn't exact, but that was basically how I did it. So I finally just said, that's not fair. I'm not doing it anymore. So I didn't.
Oh, so you opted out?
I opted out. An old Bob McKenzie trick. I opted out. So just off the top of your head, give me your top 5, because I know what the top 10 is right now. So the top 5 feel pretty obvious.
Well, do they?
Okay. Well, number 1 would be who?
McDavid.
Yes. 2. That's where it gets tricky.
See, like, I don't know. Do they have Makar up there?
He's up there, but he's not in the 2 spot.
Draisaitl?
Yes.
like Draisaitl's just an amazing player.
Yeah.
And oh man, so I got Makar.
So McDavid, Draisaitl, Makar, top 3. So
yeah, okay.
Now who do you see in the 4 or 5 spots?
I would have McKinnon up there.
Yeah,
somewhere.
That's 4. Number 4. You nailed number 4.
And 5. Oh my gosh. I'm going to go a little bit off the board here.
Okay.
David Pastrnak.
He's 7.
I think David Pastrnak is my favorite player in the league right now. I love watching him play.
Yeah.
And 61 goals last year. And he's, so he's 7, eh?
He's 7. I got yelled at during the intermission of the Leafs and the Detroit Red Wings game by Jeff O'Neill because I had Austin Matthews number 5, and both Pooley and Jeff had Matthews higher on their list than that. And Austin Matthews is number 5. So it's McDavid, Draisaitl, Makar, McKinnon, and Austin Matthews 5. And then Matthew Tkachuk is sandwiched between Matthews and Pastrnak at 6. Nikita Kucherov is 8. Jack Hughes 9. And Mikko Rantanen is 10.
Yeah, we're just talking about a player and not what they mean to their team. We're just talking about the
projecting
player,
what their year is going to look like. Who are the top 50 players this year?
This might be unpopular, but I wouldn't have Matthew that high.
Matthew Tkachuk or Austin Matthews? Yeah.
No, Matthews I would have that high, but I wouldn't have him any higher.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you could flip him and McKinnon, but what are they saying he should be where?
2 or 3, I think. Memory serves.
No, I can't. I think that's a solid spot for him. Mikko Rantanen at 10 and is low for me.
Interesting.
He's a monster, and I think 5 goals last year. Yeah. Like he's not going to drop to 31. Like that's not happening.
No.
I just, but honestly, you start splitting hairs like this, and
you really do.
I liked to not talk to anybody when we were doing this because somebody would say something, and then it'd make you question your own list.
Oh, I know.
Like, I can't do this, man. I'm never going to get this thing in. And back then, the quiz master was like, "Do you have that list ready? Is that list coming?"
Yeah, I need it by 6:15 a.m. Pacific time.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah. Oh yeah. We got it.
Wrapping up. Bedard, Connor Bedard. Does he crack your top 50 as a rookie right out of the gate?
Yeah.
Yeah. Me
too. I'd have him at 49 or 50. Like,
you almost nailed it. That is exactly the territory that he's in. I don't have the full list in front of me, but I think 48. So you can check it all out on tsn.ca. Well, thanks for doing that, Ray, because that was, I'm always intrigued by the differing opinions, especially, not that I concede to all ex-players, but you do look at things differently than I would. Of course you do. That's your
experience,
right?
Okay, I'll give you one example of why I hated those things. Is like a player like Miro Heiskanen. Like, he's an amazing player.
Yeah.
And every time I'd put him on a list, I'd go, or if I was doing it this year, I'd go, I know I would say, I've got him too low.
Yeah.
And then I try to move him up, and I'm like, okay, where do I move him to? And I would have him in the 15 to 20 range, I think. Yeah. But I'd want to move him higher. And I'm like, but it would be such a frustrating. It's fun, but it was frustrating.
You know what they should do? Again, it is an average, right? Everybody submits their list. And then, they go through the voting process, and here are the number of votes for Matthews in the 5 spot and McDavid number 1 and all of that. Everyone who votes should have to present their list publicly so that the players and the teams could see that you.
Why are you?
That would be terrible.
It would be a rotten idea. It'd be a terrible idea. I tell you, you go ahead and do it yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Beat it.
You just play the
so you can just become
a card. I'm out.
So you could just be a punching bag. It's just your opinion, man.
And especially for you, because you're in so many buildings. You're right between the benches. You imagine when a player skates out.
Oh, you've got me ranked somewhere like that. Damn. Great, thanks. There's nowhere to go. I'm in a little unsanitary little box. And I'm like, yeah, great, thanks.
All right, what do we got? We got Thanksgiving turkey. What do we got going this weekend?
Yeah, we got Thanksgiving dinner on Sunday. Nice. And Monday I'm on the road to Pittsburgh. Hope to watch a couple of because the weekend will be okay after the Cammy will have a few minutes after the game tonight. But we've been watching The Diplomat.
Oh, interesting.
And,
good.
I do like it. I like it a lot. So and it's only one season right now, and so we feel like we can catch up on that. So that's kind of the weekend, and then my season hits on Monday. So time to go.
Travel.
Well, happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Dregs, I hope you and your family, you get all the kids back. That you guys have a great Thanksgiving, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Thanks for listening.
Absolutely. Thank you to our sponsors as well, who support Ray and Dregs and make the podcast possible. Our title sponsor, Canadian Club Whiskey, and Tim Hortons. As always, thank you for listening, rating, sharing the podcast, and for following us on the Ray and Dregs YouTube channel. Until episode 5 on Tuesday, have a safe and happy Thanksgiving, everyone.